right, well, welcome to today's episode of Pastor Talk. We're really excited to talk about today's subject, which is, what is it, Michael?
It is idols.
Idols.
Bum, bum, bum. Specifically, we're looking at Isaiah 44. I was reading this a week ago or so, and I've read it before, and I've always liked it. But this time, it just really kind of smacked me in the face of going, wow, we really are stupid as people, aren't we? We just kind of like fall for things and get caught up in them and let them drag us down, and we just bow down to them and worship them for sometimes the rest of our lives. It is crazy. Because we look at Old Testament and go, they have idols, they're silly. We'd never do something like that.
That's true. I do not have an idol in my house.
You don't have a totem pole or anything like that?
No totem poles. All right, so why don't you start off by reading the passage and we'll talk about some idols.
Alrighty, so I won't read the whole entire thing because it'll be kind of long, and it's repetitive too, which is part of the hilarity in it and the fact that we are humans and we need to be smacked in the head by God by this thing. But it starts off in the beginning, talking about God just stating that he is Israel's king and the redeemer, the Lord Almighty, the first and the last. Apart from me, there is no God, he says. And then he follows that up with, is there any other God besides me? No, there is no rock. I know not one. But then as you get down into verse 9 on down through that, the rest of the chapter, it starts to talk about the idols and how we turn to the idols, how we bow down to them, and how silly it is that we do these things. So I'm going to start picking it up in verse 9 and read through there. All who make idols are nothing, and the things they treasure are worthless. Those who would speak up for them are blind. They are ignorant to their own shame. Who shapes a god and casts an idol which can profit nothing? People who do that will be put to shame. Such craftsmen are only human beings. Let them all come together and take their stand. They will be brought down to terror and shame. The blacksmith takes a tool and works with it in the coals. He shapes an idol with hammers. He forges it with the might of his arm. He gets hungry and loses his strength. He drinks no water and grows faint. The carpenter measures with a line and makes an outline with a marker. He roughs it out with a chisel and marks it with a compass. He shapes it in a human form in all its glory, that it may dwell in a shrine. He cut down cedars, or perhaps he took a cypress or an oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. It is used as fuel for burning. Some of it he takes and warms himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread. But he also fashions a god and worships it. He makes an idol and bows down to it. And then it goes in and states that again and again. And how silly it is.
This is something that we kind of overlook a lot of times in the modern church. We read different passages. We read, in Exodus when God says, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them and worship, for I am your God." And we kind of just pass over these things and think, well, we're not participating in that, obviously. Right. We don't have images of things in our home because our culture as a whole is not pro-idol in that way. So even people that don't follow the Lord, generally, unless they're, of some other religion that does have idols, it's just not something that people normally do. We look at when the Israelites, when Moses went up on the mountain, and they craft the golden calf in like 5 minutes, it feels like, and we're like, it's like, what are you guys doing? This is so dumb. Like, why would you do this? But the thing that we fail to see is the forces at hand, which are our spiritual forces and cultural forces, are just as present today as they were thousands of years ago. The way they show themselves is just very different. If you see, the spiritual forces of this world, the princes of the air, as Paul would refer to them, they are still the same ones. They're still enacting the same thing. So when we see things in the Old Testament, the different gods that people would make idols of and bow down to, we can see what they served, what those gods stood for, very much still in effect today.
Absolutely. We don't have that figurine but we're worshiping the same things, be it sex or crops, the rain, such as that. We look at it a different way because most of us are in a city or something, so we think of it as just food on the shelves, that kind of thing. But it all goes back down to that rain god that they were worshiping to. So you could have your crops, so you wouldn't starve to death and all that, or be without water, so you're thirsting and your livestock is dying off. And we look at it the same way. And if we look at, like, we could take it sex or our jobs or our families and see that those are idols in our modern days. And then let's reflect it back to chapter 44, how it talks about those trees, where he God provides the tree, and he provides the raining for that tree to grow and to prosper, the ground as well, and to nourish it and to raise it up and make it strong and make it into a big old tree, a big old piece of lumber, so that he can do these things. And then he chops down that tree. So he didn't do anything for that tree. He might have planted a seed at some point. In the verse it says maybe he did that, right? So he might have done that, but God did all the other work. And then he takes that tree and he uses it for just everyday stuff, but yet he takes a piece of that and makes an idol. So if you look at, like, our either relationships or our kids, our families, or our jobs or something like that, he has provided everything within that. He made man and woman so they come together, and you make children. So it's all God that put that together. Yeah, the man and the woman had to come together, but at the same time, God created everything to make that possible and make that happen.
And if you look at verse 18, it says, they know nothing, they understand nothing, their eyes are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds closed so they cannot understand. So it's not that they're in this thing where they're just, like, convinced. They're literally not even thinking. Verse 19 says, no one stops to think. No one has the knowledge or understanding to say, half of it I used for fuel. I even baked bread over its coals. I roasted meat and ate. Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left? Shall I bow to a block of wood? Like, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. But that stuff happens today.
We still do it today.
We still do it because other people are doing it. And if you want to know where your idols are, look at where you spend your time and where you spend your money. Mm-hmm. Because that's going to show. They did it for different motivations in the Old Testament. Some to give favor, some to get other things. But a lot of it was a cultural thing. Like, this is what my friends are doing.
That's what we do.
Right. And this is, and it's the same spiritual forces. And it says their minds are closed so they cannot understand. They don't stop to think. And I think it's important for us as Christians, because there are things like that in our lives, for us to stop and pray to the Lord, who can open our eyes, who does reveal all things to us, and pray, Lord, show me what's in my life. Lord, and then he might reveal to you, you're watching 3 hours of TV a day. This is an idol in your life. You're putting it before me. You're putting it before even your family. You're just giving leftovers to other things. It could be your cell phone. It could be sports. It could be softball. It could be so many different things in your life. And lots of times, what's really interesting is when these things have a stronghold in your life, it's very often the thing that you imagine, I can't even imagine giving this up. I would be miserable giving this thing up, whatever it is. It could be an addiction. It could be video games. It could just be, something that you enjoy that is even completely acceptable to everybody around you. And yet, if you think about it's something and it's not the Lord, right? And it's not that you cannot give up, then I would say that there's a spiritual stronghold in your life that is glazing your eyes over. They're trying to get you not to think about it, not to understand. And that's exactly where you need to pray to the Lord and ask him to not only reveal it to you, but free you from that and change your desires towards him, because you definitely can live without those things. It's not the end all be all, and your life isn't about enjoyment, about hedonism. And in fact, the truth is, when we steer ourselves away from those things, you will enjoy your life more. You 100% will. It might not feel like it right now. It might not feel like it when you're moving away from whatever your idol it is, because they can very often become addictions in your life that you need, that you feel like you need, that you're used to, that are comfortable. But moving away from it eventually and moving towards the Lord more in your day will be beneficial. It will make you happier.
You so 100% described my 20s and my false god of work. Being a young husband and father, I had to provide for my family, and that's the only thing I learned growing up, basically. And so I thought I had to work, and pay for these bills, provide and take care of things. And so I was working continuously. But eventually, God got a hold of my heart. And I was thinking, no, to be happy, I have to be working all these hours. And we're talking like 70-hour weeks, week after week after week. And so he finally gets a hold of my heart in that area and helps me drop that false god. And the joy I had from just working 40, 50 hours and being able to have time with him and have time with the family and with my wife, it was just so beautiful. And it's like, you look back and go, why could you not learn that sooner? You still a little human. But it's true. It's a good thing. Work is a good thing. We are called to work and to provide.
Nobody says it's a bad thing.
But
and the opposite of
you
not
make it
working.
an idol.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to be sloth.
Anything can be an idol. I think it's important to remember that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of this world. And they're the same beings. I mean, they're persons, right? They're these beings that they change their tactics and they change, but what they stand for is the same. And so, whereas we would look back and look at these idols and different things and be like, really, what were they gaining from it? Well, we have the unfortunate side effect now of having all this technology and different things where they are providing us things in some way. And it's usually entertainment or escapism or these different things, but they actually are providing something, even though they're functioning in the same spiritual realm. So they're even more difficult to break from nowadays, I think, than they used to be.
And you mentioned this earlier, we so need the Holy Spirit. We so need to be in a great relationship with our God and speaking to him on a daily basis throughout our day, because Satan and his demons have spent, according to the Bible, 6,000 years of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I've only had 50 years experience. You've only had 30 years experience. He's going to kick our butt. So we have to rely on God.
Right.
And God's the only one powerful enough to kick him down anyway.
And it's not a difficult thing for God.
No.
It's difficult for us to to even realize that we need to ask for help sometimes. But I think that's all part of the journey. Like, God could just solve all of our problems for us, but he wants us to realize who he is, realize how powerful he is, realize how much we need him. And our whole lives are this journey of knowing him. When we talk about like breaking from idols in our lives, I think one of the things that's so important and so overlooked often is fasting, because it's the practice, it's the spiritual practice and the physical practice that we can use to break free of the things that are so difficult to break free from, because food is the thing that we need more than anything. I mean, we really can't go without food. It's not like, now I'm trying to go without playing video games for a week. Oh, that's so hard. Like, you don't need video games. You don't need to do anything. You go without eating for a week, you will feel it. Everybody will. It's a common thing among all of humanity. Everybody has to eat. And so when you try to, when you fast, it changes your relationship to your body. It puts your mind and your will at the forefront, and it's this thing that God has encouraged us to do. And so if you truly want to desire to be free from things, fasting is the practice. It's the thing to do. It's where you have to start. And very often, if you're somebody that struggles with self-control and addictive lifestyle and different whatever you're struggling with, fasting is going to look very unappealing to you. If you're somebody that already has a lot of self-control, then it's going to be easier for you, but you probably already struggle less with some of these addictive lifestyles. But if you're the person that looks at fasting and really doesn't want to do it, you're exactly the person that needs to do it. And I've tried to incorporate fasting into my life, and more in the last few years. I did a 30-day fast, which was nuts, and then I've done some shorter ones. And I thought after the 30-day fast that I would become like better at fasting, like it would become easier for me. And it hasn't at all.
Because fasting is hard.
It's hard, but it's so good. And one thing that fasting, especially for a long period of time, taught me is that it's not my will, it's not my self-control that was lacking. It was my motivation. Mm-hmm. It was my self-motivation. Because in the case of the 30 days fasting, God specifically, while I was praying, called me to fast for 30 days. And so when God did that, that was my motivation the whole time. And I remember just like sitting in my car at times, just like yelling, like, I want the Lord more than I want food, because I was so miserable, like 10 days in, thinking I still had 20 days in, because I knew how long I was going to fast. And so I realized that it was my motivation. And so now when I struggle to fast for one day, right, because I just decided to, right, and then I realize it's my motivation that I need to shift why I'm fasting and what my goals are.
Because with fasting, it should be 100% to grow in your relationship with God. And therefore, just that alone is going to make it difficult to do, because we naturally want to go against God, our sin nature. And then Satan also wants us to go against God too. So he's going to encourage you to go that opposite direction of what you should be doing with the fasting. I wanted to jump back just prior to the fasting conversation. There's a great picture if you look at a child and a father, and the child is like headstrong. They want to do it their way. They can do it by themselves. If you have a little toddler, you see this on a regular basis, where the kid, no, they can do it themselves. They don't need any help. And they fight with it, and they fight with it, and they fight with it. And this can be like our idols that we're fighting with, thinking, no, we can get past this. We can get past this. And we keep fighting and fighting, but we can't get past it. And then eventually Dad has to bend over and help them and say, see, that was easy. Why didn't you just let me do that in the first place? And it's the same thing with God and our idols. It's just going to him and saying, God, take this from me. He said, it's about time you come and ask me for that help. I've been sitting here waiting for you. And boom, it's gone.
Yeah, and lots of times, though, God has us act out in faith. And very often, depending on what you're struggling with, what God has you do is as a demonstration of your faith, of lining yourself with him, is very often the exact thing you don't want to do, right?
Exactly.
If you're struggling with pornography, what's the thing you want to do? Well, you and Satan both just want you to keep it to yourself, right? Mm-hmm. But once that comes out in the open, and you get help from a brother and or somebody else to help you through it, that's very often the step in faith, the thing that you didn't want to do, that allows this to break free in your life, allows God to move in your life. And lots of other times with different things, we know this in the freedom ministry. Lots of times it's forgiving somebody else, like all these different things. And for everybody, it's so different. There's not like, oh, there's 10 idols and these are what you struggle with. No, it's anything that draws you away from God. Mm-hmm. Draws your money away, draws your time away, drives your thoughts away. I mean, you may be resisting in every way, but if your thoughts are still focused on something other than God all the time, then that's still an idol, even if you're not doing something actively, or you're not putting your money towards it, or we all have these things in our lives. And I think the more that we submit to the Lord, and the more it's like when you're running a race, you don't just start off running a marathon. That'd be ridiculous. You would literally die. If I went and I ran 26.2 miles, or however long a marathon is, right this second, I would die. Why? Because I'm only equipped to run 1 or 2 right now. And then my knees will give out, and my muscles are hurt, and my lungs will scream at me, and my heart is like, what the heck are you doing? And so when you're starting off and you listen to this message on Sunday and you're feeling super convicted, right? Mm-hmm. And you know what the idols are in your life. Maybe you're sitting right here and you're feeling convicted. Well, the goal line of running a marathon, the goal line of spending every waking moment with the Lord in his presence and focusing on him alone is not achievable for you at this second. You need to take the next step of spending that hour with the Lord in prayer, of taking that next step, whatever the Lord places in front of you, right? You've got a lot of things to work on. We all have a lot of things to work on. God usually chooses one thing, convicts you of it, encourages you to grow, refines you through fire, gives you opportunities to move in that direction, and that's what he'll do for the rest of your life. And so
it's you're working out and you're practicing and doing the routine again and again and again until you can get past that step and moving on to the next step and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the end goal, it's not like, oh, now I can run a marathon. The end goal with the Lord is this intimacy, this deep knowledge of him, this deep knowledge of how he created you and how he wants to be your God and your Father, and how awesome that relationship is. And it's difficult to describe in words, but the further you move in that, and I think that when we worship and when we have these moments in prayer, we get these glimpses of just how awesome and deep and intimate those moments are. And I think anybody that's experienced that, and I think very often it comes in a time of deep worship where you've been focusing on the Lord for just solely for an hour, and everything else fades away and it's just you and the Lord, and that is the best experience.
And I think the best way I can explain that relationship is it's that overly perfect father-child relationship where you can 100% trust your dad. You know he's always there. You know he always loves you. That no matter if it's a horrible thing you're going through or a great thing you're going through, he's with you. He's either having that joy with you during the good times, or he's hugging you and sitting down beside you and crying with you during those difficult situations. You always know he's there. When you've built up that relation close enough, I think that's like the ultimate goal, is no matter what's happening on this life, God is right there with you, and you can feel him. You can actually see him, I guess metaphorically see him there with you, smiling, cheering you on, or being down with you, helping cheer you up in those hard situations. It's just that relationship that it's like 10 times or 1,000 times greater than any great relationship you might have with a parent. That kind of thing.
I was just thinking, of what the other gods of this age could be, and I just realized one. As I read Jonah 2:8, it says, "Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God." Wait, that's not the verse. Oh, Judges 10:14. "Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them save you when you are in trouble."
Yeah.
And when I think about it today, and if we go outside the church and we just think of people who literally don't believe in God, mm-hmm. The God of today's age is science and knowledge.
Yes.
We live in the age where you have any knowledge at your fingertips. You just do a Google search and you have it. And if you can't do that, you have access to scientific journals, databases, as more information than anyone's ever had, and only increasing. And so the God of today's age is science and technology. And people say, why do we need God?
And if you cry out to those people, they'll say someone should help them. That will be the response.
And God says, go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them save you.
And they will do nothing for you.
Yep. But people do believe that they will. And of course, the end result of what we really need saving from is from our sins, our eternal salvation, our eternal resting place. And of course, science and technology information can do absolutely nothing for you in that respect. Only God can.
We'd like to, at this point, take the time to say, Behringer Coffee. It's keeping us refreshed and rejuvenated during this whole conversation. Behringer. That's a promise.
Anyway, we want to thank you for joining us today in today's Pastor Talk. And I would just encourage you to spend some time before the Lord and ask Him to reveal the idols in your life. Maybe this is something that you've never done. Maybe this is something you've done many times and you already know what they are. But ask God to give you the motivation and the desire to follow Him instead of these other things that you have held so high in your life. And this is an ongoing thing. We can see that in the Old Testament when the Israel, they would be following the Lord, and then they would go through this period of time where they seem to just forget. And we go through those periods in our own lives where we set ourselves on the Lord, and then it just seems to fade away, and we forget. And instead, we're supposed to, renew our spirit every day in the Lord, wake up with Him, spend time with Him, and continually, it's a continual thing every single day of your lives. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Spend some time this week and ask God to reveal those to you and give you the desire to break free from those things in your lives. Anyway, we'll see you next time.